Welcome back to TIDES, where we explore transformational innovations driving enterprise strategies. Today, we are diving into one of the most urgent and misunderstood topics in the age of AI: governance. Not governance as in bureaucracy or endless checklists, but governance as the new set of rules that determine how we use AI responsibly, how we can protect trust, and how we balance innovation with risk. And here's the real kicker: HR can't sit this one out. From hiring algorithms to workplace monitoring tools like Cluely, governance is no longer just a compliance or IT issue, it's a people issue. So I'm joined by Mercedes, who isn't afraid to challenge the status quo, to unpack the role of HR in shaping AI governance. Together, we will explore: is HR ready to lead this space? How do we put guardrails in place without stifling innovation? And what does good governance actually look like when people are at the center? Mercedes, welcome to Tides.
Thank you, Shveta.
So I'm really excited to unpack this topic with you. This is one area where I haven't been paying too much attention. So I would love to learn more through this conversation. So maybe let's start by defining the traditional definition of what is governance so that we can start building from there and get into what does future of governance look like in the times that we are living in.
Yeah, and I can take a stab with that because a lot of people think of governance as policing. But to me, governance is the processes and practices so that we can enable a coordination of all of the information that we have and the work that we have so that we can seamlessly deploy it continuously and minimizing risks to the organization and optimizing the experience for our users. So I do think it gets a bad rep, but also the term is so wide because there's so many components to it. There's AI governance and data governance and experience governance, all of the things. But what's important is for us to kind of define what that framework is for our context and just keep reminding ourselves that it's not an impediment. In fact, is the opposite, is the removal of that impediment so that together we can go slower to go faster, not just breaking things move fast and find out later. As we found out recently, things actually break when you break things fast and move on. So that's governance to me. It's not the policing, it's enablement of things so that they can come together seamlessly, reduce risk and enhance experience.
So, where does governance typically sit in the organization? Like, let's not get into AI governance specifically, but broadly, if we talk about Mercedes, you mentioned that there's data governance, there's experience governance, there's, of course, AI governance. Where has traditionally governance sat in the organization? Who looks after governance?
Yeah, that's a great question. And if I can go back to the definition, for me to narrow it down to one word, it would be boundaries. These are the boundaries for which you operate. And it really varies by context and organization. Usually there's a legal risk and compliance or technology component, and usually it's done by committee. But after leading the PMO for a while, I've distinguished governance by three levels: federal, state, and local. So federal is kind of your enterprise governance. So for example, anytime you want to bring a new vendor in, or do something at that level. Usually it's a combination of people. In my experience, a lot of that has sat within procurement and risk or technology, and they bring those people together. HR is very often missing from these enterprise conversations. So that's the federal. So for example, in my old company, if I wanted to build a new AI solution, I had to go through this governance. That's what was led by IT, and I had to talk to a group of people. Now, there's this state governance, which is a line of business. So for example, within HR, I had 64 applications and they're innovating and they're bringing new things. So I had a local risk and compliance team or a team that's supporting HR, and they were kind of my partners in that place. But I'm not aligning with the federal, like they're kind of ensuring that I'm aligning with the federal requirements, but it can get discombobulated really fast. And what's getting trickier than ever is that local, because now at the team and individual level, with the new tools, we're able to create new things at once. They're not going to governance. We can have some guardrails and hey, just make sure the thing stays within these guardrails. Don't put your data outside the company. Cool. But say, for example, somebody decides that they want to build a chatbot for all of us to consume information for onboarding, but there's already a workday with an onboarding platform, and then somebody in the enterprise is doing something similar. Those different levels of governance are so disjointed. There's no central place, and it's really hard to do it at all those levels. So in that case, you're governing for ensuring that we have the principles and we have the risk and security and compliance, but maybe not necessarily for the employee experience, because now they have 50 bucks things talking to them at the same time. And then data governance, the same. Organizations have it centrally. Some organizations have that plus like line of business, the governance. So it's really complex to govern the governance. So it varies. Some smaller organizations don't have any. Some people that are getting sued through Workday or something right now probably didn't have any governance around it, and they probably cannot actually pass an audit around here's the regulation, here's the legal risk, compliance, privacy, and ethical lines that we followed. Here's the test that we followed. Here's the SOPs, and we can present that evidence. A lot of those companies probably don't have it. So a combination, in short, of the enterprise for things like I want to bring a new vendor to the organization, and someone has to ensure that my data is not going to break the system. The local one, say for example, the state one would be all of my HR applications that usually for us, it was run through our PMO within HR and then supported by legal risk and compliance team that supported HR. And then where I think is a little bit of the Wild West is that individual team level right now. I do not know who owns that. Maybe federal people, maybe. And this is where I wish HR stepped closer to, hey, this is going to impact our people the most. It has ethical implications. It has equity, the diversity, all of the things. It's critical that we're part of that conversation. So long-winded because it's a lot of pieces to it.
Yeah. So is it fair to say then in a typical organization, if there is governance, it would typically be at that enterprise level and team level, but not at individual level in the past versions of governance? And in future state with AI involved, we need governance at all three levels.
Well, the problem is that we're treating AI as a separate thing because it's potentially so disruptive that we need guidelines for it, like the ethical guidelines and security guidelines, all of these things. So there can be guidelines for that and still be the traditional governance. So when I look at governance is governance of, is what you're doing aligning to the business outcomes? Do you have funding, legal risk compliance, privacy? Have they seen your information? Is this going to be a good experience? So on and so forth. What I've seen traditionally is that usually there's some sort of enterprise governance for when you bring in new vendors or things like that. In some cases, lines of business may not have a PMO governance, and it's just when you buy something and you go through procurement, they may flag it.
Yeah.
And that's like at the line of business. But at the individual level, I have not seen that many other than here's the enterprise policy for what you can or cannot do. But in an individual person, it's not gonna, like if they download a software that they're not supposed to, there's a lot of rogueness going on there.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep,
Yeah, but you know what's getting introduced? One last point. So, for example, say one area of the company has ServiceNow or something else, Salesforce, and then you have Workday over here, and all of these applications are going to have agents, or you're going to start building that. Who's governing that together as an experience that gets deployed correctly and the data is integrated, and you're not saying one thing over here with the same information and over here with different information? All of that is about to be a mess if we do not have a clear structure for what goes where and what we're going to decide to hold from the applications that we have, so that from the employee perspective, when they look at all these things, it's not chaos. It's like botland and AI, all the things. Now, from the back end, there's going to be agents that are doing more of the workflow invisible to the client, but they're still probably pulling from data that even if there's a human in the loop making decisions, it's going to move so fast that if that agent and that person is coming to a different conclusion, that person over here with similar data, it's not going to jive. And if you have an audit, who owns the audit? Is it the bot? Is it the human in the loop? It's I'm a little nervous about how we're underestimating. I always go back to like audits. If I have an audit, who's the owner? And half the time I didn't know exactly who the owner was. Imagine now. Is it clear that how I make the decision? Is it clear how I got the data? Do I have a testing? Do I have someone's checking the performance of the bot or whatever the thing is every 3 to 6 months? It's all of those things. And I just don't know how to do it without fully trusting the agent.
Yeah. And it's very interesting times that we live in, because we're all like any organization we work in, I can't even think of an example where I will not call that organization a digital organization, because the technology has become such a strong backbone to any organization in order for it to exist. So by default, when we think about systems and tools and technology, IT comes into mind, that IT should be the one who is gatekeeping and or at least influencing heavily where choices and decisions need to be made. And I'm not saying that's the right thing for organizations to think about, but I'm saying because everything is technology, by default, IT jumps out in our mind. But with AI this time around, there is such a heavy human element, not just from us receiving or using AI tools, but also human data is what is training all these AI models. So we need to also think about what AI technology we are using and what data it is being trained on so that we can continue to build trust in the organization to use AI, mitigate any biases and ethical issues and challenges that might also pop up. So IT alone can't look after or solve for governance.
Because the technology is not the product. The business owner that's coming in should be leading that, but also it's who's building this technology, and if we're training it, do we have the right voices training it? Do we have the right voices consuming it? Is it going to disproportionately hurt our population? But what I've seen work somewhat well is when HR is part of the conversation in that governance process. So we talk so much about whether IT is going to go under HR, whether HR is going to go to, it doesn't matter. I know most people think it's going to merge. I think eventually we're going to be like, oh, that's lovely. And then fight with each other and split it again, because it's not IT or HR. It's also legal risk and compliance. They're the ones telling us the guides, right? What matters is that not the org chart, but the work chart. So how are we organizing this thing together and have a checklist of, if we're passing this new agent or program or whatever it is, here's your guidelines. Is it ethical? Is it da, da, da? And one of those will be the people component, the people impact. And it's literally sometimes as simple as HR being on the table to start. But what we cannot do is say, that's digital, that's technology. It's not mine. No, because this is going to be about redesigning work. And that's what an organizational design person does. You're redesigning work. The how may be human and robot thingy, but at the end of the day, you want to make sure that they're not making decisions that they cannot be making, and that we're following new legislations that are coming from everywhere. Places, at the end of the day, we're responsible for that data, and we're responsible for proving that a decision was made in the right way, depending on our local or government or whatever bodies. But we cannot not lead this or be at least present in this consortium of people that are making those decisions.
Yeah. Are you seeing examples of missed opportunities in your work environments or in your network where HR could have, should have heavily played in the governance space and they opted out or they didn't pay attention to that opportunity?
So I want to give an example of that, right? The hiring, right? A lot of new vendors you've seen that are not HR vendors that are starting in the HR tech space because they're like, AI, how hard can it be? Let's just recruit and hire, right? But you don't understand the bias and the decisions that it's making. So that's an example of if an organization didn't let HR lead that and didn't have the right guardrails, that's a missed opportunity. Another example, we have this beautiful workforce planning, and then we plan for the people, but then we don't plan for the hiring. And because there's no governance, so for example, if IT decides we're going to replace all of the call center things with agents, now all these people are going to go away, right? And HR wasn't present or make a, hey, maybe let's test it incrementally or see what happens then. If that fail, now you have reputational damage. I won't name the vendor that did that, and now they're scrambling to hire people back. You have business losses and all of the things. So that's an opportunity where I'm like, where was HR? This is a terrible, that was like a PR decision. And this is where we could have been like, hey, let's test it. Let's try it out. Yes. But what's your plan B? Because it's not just people. The same as if everybody decides to just get rid of entry-level roles. Cool. Where are your future leaders coming from? So it's these little things where people just think it's about efficiency and immediate profit over people. But at the end of the day, it's real business value that we're losing because we didn't put the human at the center. It's not a fluffy empathy thing. It's a business thing. Your people drive your organization.
Yeah. That's a very interesting example because it makes me wonder because we don't know whether or not HR was involved. So if we make assumptions that the business or IT, business and IT and maybe other parts of the organization chose to make that decision and leave HR out, that's a big red flag that HR doesn't have a voice to influence strategic decisions about AI integration. That's scenario one. Scenario two is if HR was involved and it still happened, then there's a big question mark. Like, how did HR
What do you
influence
do?
that decision, right? So it's
Yeah.
such an interesting puzzle for us to look at from different vantage
Yeah.
points.
It's culture and trust, right? Do you trust your HR as an equal partner? And I think what it's doing is enhancing the gaps that we had. Talking about maturity, what I'm seeing that's really interesting. At first, we didn't know what to do with this AI. So we're doing pilots. And in that place, HR was kind of like, okay, I don't know where to go in. I might be on the governance seat. And so that's like the foundational. That's almost last year. The issue now is that that's reactive and adding the value in that I'm giving the HR lens. But if we truly want to drive the big change is looking at the work and completely redesign work. And that's not technology. That's design thinking, first thinking principles. How do you design the work? That's the reason I joined HR. I'm like, if you do not understand the work, I have zero idea how you do performance management, goals. Like what, how do you know how to make them better if you don't know what they do? So
Yeah.
this is going to push us to actually do what to me is the most important thing, the work, so that you hit the 3 layers that I always think are most important: the workforce, and workplace. You start with the work. What of that can be automated? What does that impact? What of that that we're not doing, we should be doing? We really have a huge opportunity to lead that conversation. Of course, we're using AI as tools to like help us map tasks to jobs, all of the things. Because once we do that, then we can decide, okay, what are the right people that are left? So what are the gaps? How do we anticipate that and continue the upscale? But also, how do we comp? That's a different job now. You have to do all those things. What is the career progression now? How are you getting your new talent, etc.? So that goes beyond governance. That's you being strategically forward while doing at least the design, so that you're not on the backseat just whack-a-moling individual business unit cases. That's important on the side. But to me, the bigger opportunities that are we designing, are we owning the work discussion?
Yeah.
And not let it be like, oh, an agent is the workflow. Okay, let's settle down here. Like, what is the actual work? And I would not leave that to people that don't have HR background on their own.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting because you brought up a point around if parts of a person's job are being delegated or automated to machines, what is this person going to do? Which is a big question mark. And in order to answer that question, HR needs to get their house in order also to have that intelligence about people and the work that they do, Mercedes, to your point, to say, okay, so if Shweta was a copywriter in marketing and suddenly 90% of copywriting is now done by machines, but the HR team, if set up right, can know so much about Shweta to say, here are her aspirations, here are her lived experiences, here are the skills that she has. And we can now make inferences based on all the data that we have about Shweta to see where she can quickly move within the organization or what can we reskill her, upskill her, pre-skill her on so that we can again fill her plate versus making a random decision on now 5% of marketing doesn't need copyright, so let's just slash headcount. But are we ready as HR to look at governance from our shop perspective and then support the governance throughout the enterprise? Because any technology tool that will have AI embedded in it has a huge people component to it. Let's not forget that HR is not the department in an organization which is well funded, rightly resourced, and rightly skilled. There are a lot of things that are working against HR as well. Not that they they don't want to or don't feel passionate about solving these problems. We are. That's why we are having this conversation. But our legacy is also something that we have to navigate to get ourselves out in the world. And I love the point that we are collectively making around that there's no one person who can solve this problem. This is an opportunity for us to think about a problem which is in front of us and come together as a big cross-functional brain to say, how can we look at this situation from different vantage points and perspectives to come up with the best and the right solution for what we know about the situation? Because, it just amazes me that when you made this comment about CEOs feeling very proud of the fact that they're leveraging AI for headcount reduction, and I'm like, if everybody's approaching AI integration, adoption, and not adaptation yet with AI with the same lens, then who ends up being your customer? Like, are we
We'll have
thinking in the long run?
they're gonna sell it to the 3 billionaires left. It's the same with like immigrants that we're pushing out, not to get political, but like eventually that's gonna cause all your prices to rise, and who's gonna do the work? So we have to be thoughtful, obviously practical, and I understand we have to make money, but sustainably. One of the ones that I'm really watching for is after recruiting and after we all put bots in shared services, the one now is like learning and development. We can just have one thing and then we can learn. I'm like, okay. But if the future or the now is continuous learning, and you just slashed everybody on learning and development because you have a bot, you want that person to think about the whole strategy and work it together because we have one bot. To me, this AI is not necessarily giving me time back. I don't know for you all. It's making me almost be, because I'm more efficient and effective in some ways, I'm doing more. So it's not necessarily taking away. Right now, I'm just doing more. So I'm just more stressed to the point that I started using it less. Of course, there's workflows and things that are really helpful, but we need to be more thoughtful about the implications that are midterm, long term. If you just slash everybody, your employee value proposition, why would I want to work there? All of the things, less immigrants. It's just, it is a time to look at it holistically. And the last thing I'll say here is, what, like, why are we optimizing? What is winning mean? I still haven't heard the answer because people are like humans. Like, it sounds to me that the winning is productivity, cost cutting, and 3 billionaires. That's winning to me right now. And what happened to people and planet and future customers? Because if you don't have any that are going to buy your products, there's going to be a revolution. So what's going on? So many things, Shveta.
Yeah.
We should just quit and go to the jungle and live happily ever after with my chickens.
That's right. And that brings us to what I think you mentioned it early on in our conversation, that culture is so important because even if you have pockets of people who are passionate about solving this and doing it differently and want to break out of our traditional sandboxes, siloed sandboxes to say, like HR was typically not part of governance, but I want to stick my neck out and be part of that governance conversation broadly in the organization. But if the organizational culture is not conducive for that, it's not going to get traction. It's not going to, that momentum is not going to grow. It's not going to inspire others to stick their neck out either. And I have seen that culture come in the way of intention again and again and again.
Yeah, I will say to that, I think, so two things. One, I was going to say that even for me now, I struggle to think about transforming that's not within the context of what's already existing. Like I have to really oh my God, I have to not learn it and then pretend like I don't know it so I can rebuild it. But to your point, one of the things that I'm watching out for is that I remember when we did agile transformation and same thing, right? We had these cross-functional teams and networks and we were moving faster and they're like, move faster, be independent so we can break. But we ended up with things like PMOs again and Safe Agile, which is governance and control. So I think this is going to be a similar thing that we need to do it and it's faster, but I just don't know how to do the governance itself. We're going to need to use some AI enhancements to do that. And I have zero idea what the answer is there. But then on top of that, we're going to have new shenanigans to deal with. Like what happens if someone fakes a video or an email or something by somebody? Now we have these ERKs that I have no idea if, I don't know what's true or not anymore. And that to me is like, hey, have we thought about employee relations in this time? And what if my bots gave you the wrong information? Who's responsible now? So all of those things that are coming are going to be very tactical things for us to think about, which is fascinating because we're like, this technology is going to take all of these problems. We're going to have all this free time. I'm like, and we have new problems that we're going to have to take care of. So it's to your point, exactly the work, understanding what it is, think differently about roles. But just like when we did Agile and we flattened the organization, that meant that the new problems that we had was mobility. Like people were playing different hats and then you didn't know how to comp them. So it's never going to go away, these problems. I just hope that for once we fix them together because we try to fix them in silo. That didn't work. Maybe together we can do something magical. Or again, I go back to my chickens in the farms because I feel like we try to fix this a million ways and this is just going to make it faster.
Yeah.
But they're fundamentally similar problems.
Yeah, that's true. And I like the point that we can't always think of technology with the lens of modernization. We have to think about transformation. But I also understand and hear that we are so it's been beaten into us as employees over the years that here's your sandbox, learn how to play in your sandbox. And every time you make a mistake, your hand gets slapped. So right now we are, it's really hard to even imagine how far should I stretch my imagination. What's my sandbox? Where do I have sandbox and where do I have permission to play? And we know that we can't transform by putting faster shoes on a caterpillar. That is, and we've used butterfly and caterpillar for decades now. It's not a new analogy.
Shoes are really good.
I have started moving away from caterpillar and butterfly because it's so overused to renovator and architect. We can't keep renovating the same house and expecting a new build. it's going to still be the old house. It might be now fancier with better paint and whatnot, but we'll always operate in the constraints of the wiring, the plumbing, the foundation, the framework of an existing house. So for to transform, we have to really knock down everything, have no constraints, and imagine a different future. Not an easy one to do, and it depends on the culture of the organization. But where I was going with this is that sometimes I have a feeling that external forces will be the catalyst for us to think about transformation. Think Cluely as an example. Software came out of nowhere where it just sits on your interface. Nobody knows that you're using that software. You and I are having an interaction, and AI is helping me, guiding me in terms of how to have that interaction with you. And it's totally transparent. Like, you don't know it. So how will HR, if we bring it back to HR and people in organizational context, how will you know how to manage an employee's performance if it's not based on outcomes and you're just managing somebody's performance based on what they say, when they say, and who they say the right thing to, which is sometimes the reality in our current world. Like, how do you manage performance? How do you, when you're recruiting, if an interview, somebody is using AI, how do you, on the other side, as a hiring manager or a recruiter, can figure out whether it's AI or a person? And do we really need to figure that out? Or should we be thinking about, as long as the person is getting the job done, reaching the outcome, that's what matters most? So those are the challenges that would be put in front of us, which might make us think differently, make us think beyond our defined sandboxes that we are so conditioned to play in.
Because I don't know. I think maybe sometimes I wonder if like I just don't have an opinion because I'm so overwhelmed that I'm like, I just don't care anymore. But I was actually thinking about this because my immediate reaction was like, that's cheating, bad. And then my wait, take a step back. Is it because that's what we always thought of work? Now I'm closer to it doesn't matter. They're smart enough to use it and to perform better as long as there's guidelines for data to be safe, for the governance and all of the pieces. And you still need to look at the work. Whatever they're saying, if it's not matching the work and the output, that's where the performance is going to be and why performance management matters. Right now, we don't have performance management we have compensation management or like goal setting or whatever. So we'll need to continue to pay attention to that. But now I'm on the camp that as long as it fits the guidelines of the organization and it's not like literally lying that you're not the actual person, that I don't even know how to deal with that nonsense. I'd probably start drinking when that happens, and I'm not a drinker. But I now am on the camp of, you know what, if you were smart enough to use the tools and you're hitting your outcome and you're not risking the org, good for you.
Yeah.
And I may change my mind when it's someone on my team.
Yeah, yeah. And not risking the work and the organization, the reputation, mitigating or reducing the risks is where governance comes into play. So it's not like stifling innovation and stopping it. It's not like we are asking everybody to not use calculators and, or Excel sheet to do the job, do it without it. We're There has to be focus and attention on, if this change is coming our way, how do we make it safe?
What really worries me is that I no longer know what is trust. Because in order for AI to work and scale, we have to fully trust it. I don't trust it at all. I legitimately go to like ChatGPT, then I go to Perplexity and I'm like, check the sources. Because I wrote something once and I had the sources. I'm like, ooh, look at me. When I read the actual sources, it didn't say any of the information that the thing said it said. And then I'm like, is the original source written by ChatGPT also? Is it fake? Like, I don't trust anything. And that, I do not know how we're going to get through that. So things like that would worry me, that we're using it and there's no way to know anymore what's true or not. And so regardless of the governance, if the source is not known, how do you check? So I think for me, that's one that's really overwhelming. Even at my personal life of using it, I'm always paranoid that I'm going to write something and I'm like, this. The other day I wrote a post and it gave me like the most beautiful quote and I almost posted it and I'm like, let me check. Non-existent quote. But like it's happening to legal cases now, right? So then if that continues and the AI is like looking at that, like at what point does it become true? Now there's indigenous and other people's information that's not even there because it's verbal, not written. So there's so much implication to that. If we're using it and we're improving our systems and all of that, I'm good. I'm just concerned of the things that we cannot control, that once they're out there, how do you even govern that? I don't know. Overwhelming to think about.
I still hear people talk about things like, if we use AI, will we become less smart than we were? I'm like, did we have this question when we first went from oral traditions to documenting things or using calculator to do mathematics.
I agree to some extent, but where I started to notice that I felt dumber and like I worried that I was outsourcing my thinking, and it goes back to like trust. If we're expected to do a lot more and we have to trust it, we're going to have to let go of some of the thinking. And so, for example, if I'm writing something and I'm on version 97, at the end, I'm like tired. So I'm like, oh yeah, that looks great. And then I read it like with a little bit more thought. I'm like, this makes no sense. And I was just totally copying it. But maybe because I'm English as a second language, I go back and read it. I'm like, maybe it's right. Like I start to second guess myself. So
Yeah.
that's that. It's like everything. A tool is a tool, is how you use it, right? Because I could say the same thing for the internet. I could just Google and pass. It's just faster.
That's right. And both your arguments and points are valid, because I'll give you a personal example. I was just, like curious, and I wanted to use an LLM to try and do some astrology work for me. And I gave the same information to ChatGPT, to Gemini, to Grok, and all three had different output. I'm like, what the heck? This is not making sense. Like either, and then I have a written book which was made when I was born, with a person, a human, creating my astrological chart. And that was a completely different information. And when I fed that into an LLM, it said, this is not, whatever your written book is telling me is scientifically not possible based on all the data that the LLM had crunched about planetary alignments and whatnot. And it's like, who do I trust now? Where do I go from here?
I'm going to give you a perfect example for governance with that. So I'm going back to like the tools. In my company, we have fair housing. So we need to treat everybody equally when they try to go and rent an apartment from us. Imagine if the people that are selling my apartments are trying to check if what they're saying is aligned with fair housing rules, but all of them are using a different tool and it's saying something different, that now we're out of compliance. And so for me, anything that generates, and I cannot fully trust it, it almost makes it worse, because now I don't even know how to govern if what we said is correct or not, or align it, right? Because who do you trust? Mm-hmm. So that's why for me, I'm like, okay, let's go back to automation and workflows and less on this augmentation in some of these aspects, unless it's something really specific for creativity and as a starting point. Like I use it to give it an argument, and I fed it some of my bosses information and replies. And I'm like, how is my boss not going to like this? And how are other voices? Like as that starting point or questioning my brain, that's fantastic. But I wouldn't use it for making final decisions. I wouldn't use it for payroll or things like that. So it's just that I think we're figuring out where it has value, where not so much. I think we still don't quite know. We still don't quite know.
We don't. And that's why understanding the nature of work and how it's getting done is so important, because in the astrology scenario, I didn't stop. I didn't give up. I still went in passionately, trying to troubleshoot. Why is this not making sense? And where I landed was, instead of asking it to do the work from scratch, I gave it all the charts that are drawn using astrology software and then asked it to interpret. So, that's where understanding work and where in the workflow it makes sense to have AI becomes more and more important. And I think it didn't stop me. So I don't think I became dumber. But at the same time, I couldn't fully trust the output either. So it was overwhelming experience for me in the moment, because I was like, this is just waste of time. It took me 2 hours to do something that I would have gotten done in 15 minutes using a traditional methodology.
As it gets smarter, do you think that you're going to trust yourself more than the thing? Because I'm starting to get to the point that I'm like, maybe that thing is just smarter than me. Like, I don't know. Well, just one say there, because you say it's not perfect and it makes mistakes and we don't tolerate that. But humans make a lot of mistakes, right? So, but for the record, you all know I'm not a self-drive fan or an Elon Musk fan at all. And I have very strong opinions for very different social political reasons. But for the tech itself, it's very curious to me, because you're right. Like, we don't trust it because he made one mistake. But what if the human would have made 10 mistakes? Like, it's just very interesting what we now, again, we need to revisit what's human, what's not, and we're going to tolerate versus not. Yeah. And it's going to be trust. Who do we trust with our data? But also, what do we trust the things to do and what's acceptable versus not? Yeah. Man, it's a crazy time to be alive.
It is. And I would say it's so person specific too. No two people will experience this technology in the same way. Like if Elon Musk uses AI to do whatever he needs to do, AI is going to exponentially increase his intelligence from his starting point. But whereas somebody else, you give that person the same AI, but they might not reach the same outcome. So, it's
It
so
really is.
specific to a person, how they engage with it and what they do with the technology.
But it's just it's a super interesting time for governance and to what you're doing. But and going back to your point that if Elon Musk is using it for something, obviously it's going to be exponentially better than someone else. My concern is that we're giving these very powerful tools to a lot of kids now that don't know how to use it. If I don't know how to prompt it, it's going to tell me crazy things. And given the recent tragic things with some of the unethical things of how we're configuring some of these systems, we don't even know what the consequences will be. So I think on the balance, I'm hopeful that it's positive. I think for healthcare and all of these things is going to be amazing. But I go back to values, because for me, why do I want to do this if what's going to really end up is with 4 people that are just richer? Because that's what I see.
That is definitely the current reality. It doesn't seem like we are going towards utopia. It's definitely looking like a dystopian future for now. But if we try to zoom into that one point that you made, Mercedes, about people not knowing how to use AI, which is a big opportunity right now. And we can't look at it as let's train everybody on using AI. It's not like training somebody how to use Word or a calculator. We have to come up with novel ways of thinking about helping people understand how to be AI fluent, because this time around, we are not dealing with a tool, we are dealing with an intelligence. It's a different landscape altogether. I don't have the answer. I'm not saying I have the answer, but I know for sure that old ways are not going to help us in this scenario to mitigate that risk, which is a big risk that you're flagging here, that not everybody knows right now how to engage with technology, this intelligence in the right way.
It's true. And it's how to prompt it too. Like, and I'm still concerned that the number one use case is therapy and friendship and our lack of connection. So at the end of the day, why? What is progress? What are we doing this for?
Yeah.
But going back at the end of the day to bring it back to the governance for the organization, at the end of the day, I feel like we got away from like the business outcomes and we got distracted by the shiny. It's time to get back to what is my business? What are my business outcomes? What is my context within that ecosystem? Where do I need to focus? And that is the boundaries that your governance will bring you, so that you focus and you don't get distracted by the noise, because things are moving so fast. And if we can get that and rein it back in and put not just the productivity, but the human together as like the outcome, I'm still going to be hopeful for us. But I don't know. My hope is running kind of like thin, but it's still there.
Yeah. Well, that's a great point to end our conversation on today, because there are so many dimensions that we can continue to unpack. But we'll pause our conversation today. What I'm taking away is this: governance in the age of AI isn't about red tape. It's about trust. It's about HR stepping up, not just as enforcers of policy, but as co-creators of ethical and human-centered rules for how technology shapes work. Because here's the truth: if HR doesn't lead or has a role in this governance conversation, then someone else will. And that someone else might not look at governance with the same lens as HR would. So, Mercedes, thank you so much for bringing your insights and honesty to this conversation.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, I'll leave you with this one question. In your organization, who is really writing the rules of trust when it comes to AI? I'm Shveta Malhan, and this is TIDES. Until next time, keep imagining, keep questioning, and keep shaping the future.